This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at a new Inspiron model from Dell. This is the Inspiron 11. It's an affordable little guy, and it's a lot like the Yoga. In fact, it competes with the Yoga 11-inch because, well, Yoga's priced around $50 less. We're going to look at it now. So here it is, something new for Dell, the Dell Inspiron 11. The Inspiron series, of course, isn't new. It's right there under the XPS line, giving you durability, good value for the money, that sort of thing, but not as many frou-frou features, say, as the XPS line, like that neat carbon fiber look and stuff like that. Well, so what's new here? There's also going to be a 13-inch, by the way. This is the Inspiron 11. There'll be an Inspiron 13. This one does the Yoga thing. Okay, we all probably know what that is by now. It's the Lenovo Yoga design. Now, other manufacturers have been copying that, so voila, it is a laptop right now, a small one, albeit you might even call it a netbook on steroids, and then you do this kind of thing, and you have tent mode right there. So for those of you who don't want to go out and get a stand sturdy enough to hold this thing up in tablet mode, you don't have to, because it does this. It's not particularly rubbery, grippy on the edges here, but it's okay. It's not moving right now. You poke at the screen and so on, and it's not moving anywhere. Works fine. You can, of course, do presentation mode. All Yoga all the time. Of course, everything the Yoga does, this one does. So there's that right there. And then there's good old tablet mode for your 11.6-inch tablet. Now, the keyboard locks on the back. Just like the Yoga, you have this thing of the exposed keyboard here. Dell tried to address that with the XPS 11 that had a continuous surface keyboard, which was just really no fun to type on. So we're back to this here thing, no lock and load, because this is not a high-end device like the Lenovo ThinkPad Yoga. But anyway, other than the fact that tactilely this might just feel a little bit weird to you, the keyboard does turn off and you can use it as a tablet too. Now it weighs 3 pounds, just hair over 3 pounds. So this is not like holding an iPad, obviously. I think you get that idea by now. Most of the Windows convertible Ultrabook 2-in-1 sort of devices tend to be heavier because they have, well, full computer internals. This is not a mobile OS tablet like the iPad or an Android tablet that, well, is much less complex inside, that sort of thing. Starts at $399, and there you get an Intel Celeron dual-core CPU. And for $479, you can move up to a quad-core Pentium, which is the model that we have here, clocked at 2.16 gigahertz with burst to 2.58 gigahertz. So the current generation of Celeron and Pentiums are really a branch of the Bay Trail. So those of you who know Bay Trail Intel Atom CPUs that are used in tablets, this is a relative. This is much higher wattage. This is faster clock speed. The chip itself actually costs more. And it's based on the Silvermont architecture. It can do out-of-order execution for those of you who are into CPUs. So it's not a bad CPU at all. Not as fast as the Intel Core series of CPUs, but significantly faster than the Bay Trail Atom T-series that's used in tablets. In keeping with the internals of this being more like a laptop than anything else, nice thing is actually for something that I would still call sort of budgety in a way, it's real easy to take off this bottom panel. It's just a bunch of Phillips head screws right here. You can take it off. 2.5-inch standard SATA drive bay, so you can actually upgrade the hard drive. Now this comes with a 500 gig 5400 RPM hard drive from the factory. So the good news is you get a lot of storage, right? A lot of these little guys come with SSDs, which increases the price and also reduces vastly the amount of storage that's available for your dollar. So for those of you who need a kind of all-around machine where you can store all your movies, your files, whatever it is you've got, this works for that. It also has a RAM slot, a single standard SODIMM slot. It uses DDR3 low power RAM, so again, standard memory in here. One slot means you can go up to 8 gigs, which is what the Pentium CPU can address anyway. So it's kind of neat that you can actually do that compared to Ultrabooks, where so much is sealed inside, soldered on, not upgradable. It also has a standard socketed wireless card. Now this guy has 802.11 BGN 2.4 gigahertz single band Wi-Fi. Now I'd like dual band, but for the price, when you're talking about around $400 or so, that's acceptable. And since it is socketed and it's easy enough to open this up, you could swap in a different wireless card if you want. That said, wireless on this has been fine and strong. The nice thing about 2.4 gigahertz is it has good range. The bad thing is, of course, if you live in a place with lots of access points and a lot of pollution, you could have some problems. Also, Bluetooth 4.0, which this has, could potentially interfere with your Wi-Fi or vice versa. Does support Miracast, so you got wireless display on board here. And speaking of that, we have a 1366 by 768 touchscreen, 10 points of multi-touch. It's a nice enough screen, nice and sharp, pretty bright too, good color saturation. Obviously, this is not going to be a super high gamut, $1,000 plus kind of panel on here. But for the price, it's really, really quite nice, honestly. And the resolution, yeah, it's not full HD, but this is 11.6 inches, so it's perfectly acceptable. Everything looks clear on it. Should you want to use an external display, nice thing is you actually get a full-size HDMI port. For a little guy, you get a good number of ports here. Full-size HDMI versus the smaller size port on the Yoga 11-inch latest generation. That's where our power brick plugs in, pretty much your standard size, more portable size power brick. USB ports, this has 3 total, which is nice. So we get one USB 3.0 port here, one USB 2.0 port, our combo mic headphone jack. That's the speaker. This has stereo speakers. On this side over here, there's our other speaker. This is another USB 2.0 port, so 2 2.0 ports, 1 3.0 port. SD card slot right there. Your volume control, so when you're using this in tablet mode, you can still easily change volume, and that's the power button right there. Nice enough looking, a combination of plastic and metal, not real cheesy or anything like that, so certainly better than netbook level product there, not shiny, cheap, nasty plastics at all. Pretty firm, pretty well put together. Inspirons are fairly sturdy things, they're pretty heat tolerant things as well, and given the fact that this has a Pentium, you don't really have to worry much about heat buildup like with the core CPU, and I have yet to make this thing get hot. Of course, being a Pentium, not being a core CPU, this is not a super duper heavy lifter. It's more than perfectly adequate for doing MS Office, for doing social networking, for doing Photoshop editing. I mean, unless you do that day in and day out with really high resolution images. Casual video editing, sure. If you're really into serious full HD video editing, you're probably going to want a more powerful machine. Screen is nice enough actually to enjoy the act of editing photos on this guy. 0.76 inches, so it's not too thick, under an inch obviously by a wide margin there, and all in all nice looking, certainly at least as nice as the Lenovo Yoga 11. Keeping with the Inspiron, it is sturdy, kind of for your money thing. You've got a hinge here that looks remarkably like, well, the Yoga hinge on the ThinkPad. It's kind of a strap wide hinge here, nice and stiff, not too bouncy, so that means that you're not going to tap the screen and have it go bouncing everywhere. It doesn't really. I'm hitting on it right now. It doesn't move. Nice and stiff. Dell says they tested to like 200,000 opening and closings, which is an awful lot of opening and closings. And we have our air vent right over here, obviously. The keyboard, for this price, well, you're not going to get backlighting, but otherwise it's not a bad keyboard. Right here we have an island-style keyboard. Pretty good tactile feel. You can hear the clicks there. It's a pleasing click without being too annoying or anything like that. Nice enough to type on. Yeah, it's 11.6 inches, so those of you who have big hands and are used to a 15-inch laptop might find it cramped, but honestly, for a machine this size, not bad at all. Here we have the trackpad, which is relatively large given the size of the machine. Dell's pretty proud of that. They make a big deal of it. And this is a Synaptics trackpad with a fairly full-featured control panel that Dell brands. Works well with multi-touch gestures. It has quite a bit of resistance, so those of you who like silky ones probably won't like it so much. Those of you who like a little tactile drag are going to enjoy it. Of course, a lot of the time you can just use the touch screen too. We got our little arrow keys right here. We have our FN and multimedia controls up here. Very standard keyboard layout. Really nothing to see here. It gets the job done. It works pretty well. For those of you who are wondering, thinking about this for back to school, I mean, this would be a great high school machine. Maybe even college, depending on what your major is. If you really don't do any serious heavy lifting with your computer, you just mostly spend your day in MS Office, for example, on the web. You want to play videos, perfectly adequate for that. Let's see how it handles video playback. So we have our 4K Sony Bravia test video here. Obviously, the panel isn't nearly 4K, but just to show you that it can handle it. And the speakers are at 52% volume. Really amazing. Listen to that, right? So honestly, enough horsepower here for probably the average user, be it home user or student kind of user, unless you're, well, if you're doing software development all day, really I would go with the Intel Core CPU, that sort of thing. If you're doing CAD work, obviously you want more than Intel HD graphics. This is Intel HD graphics, lesser even than HD 4400 that's in Intel Core series. It's good enough, obviously, to play the kinds of games that are in the Metro store here, the live tile kind of games, and some older games, casual games, certainly are fine. This is not the one to be playing Crisis 3 on, Battlefield 4, anything like that. I'm sure some of you will push it. You can get Civ going on this at native resolution. It's really not that demanding, but as you get an hour and a half into the game, you'll notice the turns take, well, some time. In terms of synthetic benchmark scores, on PC Mark 7, it scored 1643. Now we see something closer to 5,000 on an Intel Core i5 Ultrabook with an SSD. PC Mark 7 puts a lot of weight on the SSD. So take that for what it's worth, because obviously this one has a conventional spinning hard drive inside. As a machine you can kind of hot rod it. It is interesting though, because you could put a 2.5-inch standard SATA SSD in this guy. You could even upgrade the RAM, so it's kind of like a little, budget tuner machine here. For W prime, it computed pi in 28.82 seconds. That's pretty good, and W prime indicates obviously the CPU speed more than anything else. Is computing pi, so usually we see around 22 seconds for a Core i5. So going from 22 to 28 seconds isn't really that bad. Geekbench 3, also pretty much processor intensive, single core. This is a 64-bit test. This is full Windows 8.1 64-bit here. 1031 for the single core and 3300 for the multi-core. So pretty decent scores there. And again, this is a full Windows PC. You want to put Photoshop, real Photoshop on here, you can do that. You want to put any Windows program, load any Windows drivers for your printers, for your 3G, 4G LTE dongle. This is a full Windows machine. So how about battery life? Well, obviously the battery is sealed inside here, but not too hard to get to. And we'll splice in a picture so you can see what the internals look like. Anyway, undo the screws. Pretty easy to access the 43 watt-hour 8-cell battery that's inside, along with all the other upgradable parts that I mentioned. Dell claims 8 hours of use on a charge with this. So far in our tests, we're seeing about 6.5, even 7 at times, and that's with brightness set at 40%, which is usable. I personally like it a little bit brighter, but I know a lot of you find 40% on a fairly bright display like this adequate, and that's doing a mix of productivity things. I'm working on MS Word to write some reviews, doing some social networking, checking email, playing a couple of YouTube videos. You get the idea. Now, if you're going to be using this just for playing games and for streaming HD video, not really a point for full HD unless you're going to be throwing the content onto your TV, either via Miracast or HDMI. Then you'll get shorter run times, of course. So who is this machine for? Not just those of you who really enjoy flat computing, obviously. Like I said, this is a great machine for students, particularly high school students, even college students, for those of you who are not going into engineering majors. Anybody who wants something that's affordable, high quality, pretty darn durable, has a decent amount of ports and enough performance to handle everyday kind of tasks. It's really a good job. And Dell obviously was looking at the Yoga 11 when it built this machine, and the fact that it's coming in around $50 less is pretty darn enticing. So that's the Dell Inspiron 11-3000 series, just starting to become available now in July of 2014. And if you're looking for something that's really light, very portable, very affordable, it's a really good unit. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.